our present state ready for. It's a world where we will be made perfect in resurrected life with Christ, where that will become the reality. There was a question, okay.
Is there any reference point, meaning the memory, when we go into this new world? I mean, it'll be so different that we won't know what we've lost, will we? I mean, there's no memory bank at that point.
It's hard to say that there's no memory bank, but I think we'll see things from God's perspective in a deeper way. I do not know what that will be like, because the Scriptures don't speculate. But I would be surprised if it's all eliminated, because they will still know about the great things that Jesus accomplished, and before that, the Exodus and all those things. I think what it'll be is that we will see things from an entirely different perspective, and I don't know what that'll be like.
But there will be no distinguishing between right and wrong, because there will be no wrong, right?
Well, no wrong, right? Yeah, it's a left turn, right? We will, I think, be aware of what has happened, and what we will know is that evil will have been quarantined. That's really the black hole of hell itself. There will have been a kind of a quarantining of evil. I think we will be, as a result of what we have gone through and seen and done, be aware of the true goodness of God and the true sinfulness of sin. I think that our awareness of the grace of God will have grown. And this is very important. That the two things seem to grow at the same time with the great saints. They become increasingly aware of the goodness of God and the sinfulness of sin. So that the goodness of God's goodness and the malevolence of evil, and that the disparity between the goodness of God and the wickedness of sin is our comprehension of grace. The more of those that becomes greater, the greater our perception of grace becomes. There was another question, I thought. Yes.
I just had a thought here. It may be simplistic, but talking about the greater good being accomplished, people are killed in automobile accidents, but would any of us say that our world would be better without automobiles?
Yeah, I mean, there are always dangers. If a thing can be used for good, it can be used for ill. That's just the nature of it. In this kind of world, that's the nature of it. It's a fallen world physically. It's a fallen world spiritually. And so you don't want to just uniformly say that, that all of automobiles therefore are bad because they did this, that, and the other. There are good factors as well. But it is to say, though, that the kind of world we're talking about is preparation for a better world that almost is beyond our grasp and imagination.
Yeah, Ken, since we talk about a fallen world, well, what took place in heaven where rebellion and an archangel is sent out and cast down to earth, and we see a judgment coming? Well, in heaven, can there be another rebellion?
Yeah, that's a common question. You know, if there was a rebellion in heaven, why can't there be another rebellion?
That's right.
Yeah, and I think that you have two things. I won't go into detail here, but you have two orders of creation. You have the angelic, which are disembodied spirits, and you have the human. And the angelic fall taking place prior to the human fall was such that there is apparently an unconfirmed, let's call it an innocence, not a positive righteousness. There is the relationship with God requires a choice, and evidently a choice was made, but with the angelic beings it was all at once, because all angels that would ever exist existed at the same time. They don't need to recreate because they were all existing at the same time. Those angels that rebelled against God are in a permanent condition then of being at enmity with Him. Those that chose not to rebel but chose God's will were ones that then, having made that choice is confirmed. I think the same, my own suspicion, and I can't demonstrate this, is that they didn't have the full vision of God, because if they did, they couldn't have chosen any other way. You see, and God's desire is that we have the power to make free choices. And I think that the angelic fall was, in fact, a possibility, but that once the those who chose God, made that choice, then he could reveal the fullness. And my belief then is when we similarly face and stand before Jesus and see him in his fullness and see God face to face in that resurrected life, then we will see the one where in this world we had to choose by faith. But there we will see by sight. And then there will be no desire to go elsewhere because we will realize fully and completely that he is the wellspring of all passion and purpose and goodness and pleasure. So that then I use an analogy right now where there are some things that we can be temptable and we can fall, but there are some things that I can be tempted but not likely to fall. I'll give you an example. When I go to the Grand Canyon, I'm tempted to fly. But I am. But I'm also too well aware of the consequences to take the leap. You see? I'm aware of what that would be so fully and so completely that I may be tempted to do that, but I'd know that's the way of idiocy. Unless I thought that I was Superman or something like that, that I'm not likely to do that kind of a thing. So I'm just suggesting here that in the garden we too were innocent in the sense that we were able not to sin, but having made a choice against God, we were not able not to sin. Now in Christ we're able not to sin again, but I believe the time will come when we're not able to sin. And that'll be in the resurrection when you see him face to face. Quite a lot of questions. Yes, Chip.
Just a thought of, actually a question on randomness. They say in poker over a lifetime, you get about the same number of good cards as you get bad cards. Now, in our lifetime, in a general 80-year span, is it a general statement that we're going to get about the same number of bad cards dealt to us as the general populace, and the same number of good cards? Is that a truism in general?
I'd be afraid to say that because if you ask people in Darfur about that, I'm not so sure that they would agree that the cards are generally good, half and half good. Part of the poker thing is if you stretch it out for a long time, but many people, it's like having two hands that are bad, and that's all they get. Now, having said that, actually no one has nothing but unmitigated evil. No one does. There are graces and there are things, and even in painful environments there are great goods and benefits that, and by the way, it's very significant to me and instructive to me that people in Rwanda, Darfur, Tanzania do not complain as much about the problem of evil and suffering as we do. You notice that these issues are not as big a question. They say this is the way life is. But they also recognize that there can be great goods and relationships and so forth can at least mitigate that. But why some people go through life and it's like a luxury liner in comparison to other people who are just barely making it on this crummy little boat, I don't have an answer.
Well, the purpose of the question
yeah.
is that when you're counseling people and they've had a bad string of bad cards, isn't it fair to say, hey, just hold on because you've got a good string of good cards coming? Can that be a statement?
Well, it could. I don't want to promise them something that now, because what happens if those cards don't happen? I can promise that life is not going to be an unmitigated evil. But that doesn't mean there's going to be a lot of great stuff coming. I guess I'd be cautious before I made that promise. What I would promise, though, is that the promises of God are such that whether we have these tracks here, and there are painful things that happen, there are good things happen, and both were in the same track. There are both things happen. Frankly, every day is like that. If you stop and think about that, every day has its good and every day has its evil. So if you look at it every day, I guess you get cards of both descriptions.
Yeah, the best answer to that, there's a quote by Socrates that says that if all the world's burdens and problems were piled in a heap, and we were